Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Robert Adams, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Warrant Officer Class 2, Diane Mason. We are honoured to acknowledge the Honourable Tony Abbott, Member of the Council of the Australian War Memorial. We warmly welcome the United States Congressional Delegation, who are accompanied by representatives from the Australian Departments of Defence, Home Affairs and Foreign Affairs and Trade. As always, we welcome the veterans who have served, those who are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors to the memorial. If you are able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations over more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private George Stephen Tilbee. George Tilbee was born in 1893 in the village of Mollash in Kent, southeast England. One of 12 children born to a farmer manager, Frederick Thomas Tilbee, and his wife, Catherine. He received his education at the local public school before moving to Western Australia with his family when he was 16 years old. The family settled in Perth, suburb of Midland Junction, where his father worked as a plasterer. At the outbreak of the First World War in 1914, George was working as a general yardman in the city. George Tilbee enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force on the 7th of October 1915. Assigned to reinforcements of the 16th Battalion, he underwent a short period of training in Australia before embarking for active service from Fremantle on the 29th of January 1916, sailing on board the troop ship Runic. Private Tilbee arrived in Egypt in late February and continued training alongside other new recruits. In April, during a period of expansion of the AIF, Tilbee was transferred to the newly formed 48th Battalion. He spent a further 2 months training with his new unit before embarking for the Western Front on the 2nd of June 1916. Tilbee and his comrades arrived at the French city of Marseille after a week-long voyage. From there, they were immediately sent north to the Franco-Belgian border, where Tilbee undertook routine training and frontline duty. In August, a few weeks after reaching France, Tilbee was drawn into the fighting around the villages of Pozières. The 48th Battalion was tasked with defending ground taken in earlier attacks in July. Tilbee's unit entered the firing line on the 5th of August 1916, coming under heavy shelling and machine gun fire from enemy's trenches, which cost them hundreds of casualties. Private Herbert Harris, who was also caught in the fighting, described the battle. Imagine men dug in a few feet into the ground and shells falling just like rain. Trenches blown up and men digging for dear life to rebuild them, or rescuing their comrades who were buried, and in most cases the rescuers were also buried by shells. When entering the trenches, we were bombarded with tear and gas shells, which made us wear our gas helmets. It is almost impossible to see and hard to breathe. I have heard officers and men say that the landing and the Lone Pine Battle of Gallipoli were a picnic compared to this last fight. Tilbee's unit was relieved from the trenches on the 7th of August, but returned just a few days later on the 12th. Desperately under strength after their first stint at Pozières, their situation became dire as the enemy continued heavily shelling their lines throughout the night and into the following day. Multiple casualties resulted from the bombardment. Among the dead was Private George Tilbee, killed on the 13th of August 1916. The news of his death reached his family as it received word of the death of George's brothers Walter and Charlie, who had also been killed at the front. The Midland Junction Camp Chronicle reported the family loss, noting, "It seems almost unbelievable that sorrow should be so heaped on sorrow." George Tilbee's final resting place was never found. Today he is commemorated on the Australian War Memorial at Villas Bretonneux, among more than 10,000 others who have no grave. George Tilbee was 22 years old. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph is displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private George Stephen Tilbee, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
If you are able, please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, for we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. In the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they'll be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director, staff and volunteers, we thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support during the Memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.